What is going on, everybody? It is TripleCrown24 with a new episode of the Sports Card Psychology Podcast. If you are joining me on the YouTube side of things, you may notice a few things look different. I'm actually recording this in my home office today. Might do some more of these in the future, just kind of depends on when recording times happen. If you're listening anywhere else, and it will probably sound pretty normal to you. But today's show, we're going to be dealing with the aftermath of what is being called one of the biggest trades in baseball history. Now, will it go down as such? Time will tell. But the centerpiece of this deal was a athlete who we discussed episode 2 of the show with Ed Weskergriff, because I just think he's such an interesting case study, and that would be Juan Soto. But I wanted to take a different approach, and this episode might be a bit less about Soto and more so about the idea of losing your team's identity through its star players. So I went out on the interwebs, I recruited a Nationals fan to come talk about what life in the post Soto era has been like. So I recruited a PSA card guy, Bart of Bart's Cards. How we doing, my friend?
Hey, JT. What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I guess the first question for you is, how are you holding up now, about 24 hours after the news broke of his trade?
It's a rough one. It's a rough one. There ain't a whole lot to look forward to for this baseball season left for us. Not that we were doing well already. I think now we're, 36-71 or something close to that with tonight's game. So prospects weren't looking too great. So Soto was our only silver lining. You know, if he hit a home run and got to trot the bags, that was about it for us. We were calling those wins for the season. So without that, it's slim. Not looking good for us. Got to look for 2023.
Right. I'm sure that management, when they made this move, were definitely thinking about the future. I mean, that just what they got back speaks for itself. You do have some MLB ready guys. For those who haven't heard, I'm sure most everyone watching this has probably heard, but it's Soto and Josh Bell who are going to the Padres. In return, the Nationals are getting back CJ Abrams, who was a former top 10 prospect. Same with Kenzie Gore. They're now rookies. They've used up their eligibility. They do have a major league piece coming back in Luke Voigt, kind of a veteran first baseman, was the home run champ in the 2020 shortened season. Former first round pick, top 10 pick Robert Hassell III. Jarlin Sasada is a pitcher who seems to be one of the more underrated pieces. And then James Wood, who most hobby people are going to know as one of the bigger names in this year's first Bowman class in the 2022 Bowman release. So I know that you probably don't want to hear about those guys right now, and we won't talk about those guys too much. But Bart, you put out a great video the other day talking about kind of your Nationals fandom. One thing I didn't really hear you touch on too much within that video was your Soto collection. So, from a hobby standpoint, how do you interact with the Nationals and more specifically Juan Soto cards?
Well, as far as getting after the Nationals, I pretty much just pick up cards that are they tell the story of the franchise, as it were, as opposed to large scale collecting of the team. You know, I do kind of, somebody always pieces them together after breaking so many boxes, team sets or something like that. So I'll throw $4 or $5 at a Topps team set or two every year just to, have them in a team bag, sitting in a PC. But for anybody that knows me, I'm a Niners guy as well. And so I've got the entire run high end graded for all that stuff. And I just didn't think that was a good idea, even trying that with such a new team or anything. So I really baseball went with players and things like that. And so didn't quite work out with Bryce Harper, right? And then we had Scherzer and Trey Turner, and Rendon was coming around. And so he was a fan favorite for the team. And so Soto kind of just was that next jump. And, there's just a world of excitement surrounding somebody like that. When they come up that early, you just as a fan are drooling over an opportunity to, if this guy's 19, do I get to watch this guy for the next 20 years? Like, there couldn't be anything possibly better than that as far as a fan goes, right? And so I did focus on him more than any other player. I made sure I got, a couple here and there of other stars, but as far as what I'm collecting now on Nationals, he was it. I looked it up, maybe like 50 graded cards now. I just sent 15 more good ones off to PSA with that $18 special in July. And, I got another, 300 raw cards or something like that. Nothing crazy. As I was trying to pace myself, knowing hoping I was going to have the opportunity for a good number of years. And so, if you go all in and get every tops thing that you can find per year, you'll just be sitting on the boxes by the end of 20 years. So I tried to pace and be a little bit more selective along the way, but he was it pretty much as far as what I was collecting Nationals wise, because everybody else like him now is traded away.
Yeah, it's that team gutted its roster a few years back, and they're still gutting it 6 years later, which we'll save that discussion for a different day. So I definitely empathize with where you're coming from. And I'm sure anyone who's familiar, again, Bart's Cards on YouTube, and there will be a link down below to go check him out. We know you as a football guy, we know you as a Niners guy, but I think it's interesting because really pre-Harper era, the Nationals, since they came to DC, were nothing to write home about. There wasn't really, they were the cellar dwellers for the longest time. And then you had a huge spike in interest when Strasburg came along, probably the most hype we've seen around a pitcher in the hobby, and equal hype, I would say, when Bryce Harper came out, and you mentioned that. And then, years of not really doing, they won division titles, but not really making a deep run. You have a guy like Soto come in, and they put the pieces of the puzzle together in 19, which I got to imagine, it's very rewarding when you see a franchise, you're following them when they were losing 100+ games a season, and you see them kind of end the decade as the champions. Did that cut into, I would say you're more of a football guy. Would you say that the baseball really started to cut into your football at all, or do you still always kept football number one in your collecting ways personally?
Yeah, I guess I was in so deep with football because I started collecting that from a real young age. I don't know how I picked that one up versus another. Family didn't push me towards collecting or sports cards anyway. My dad's a coin collector, so I kind of found football, and then I just had always kind of been grasping, knowing I was missing out on opportunity with baseball. So I paid attention. I rooted for Bonds for many years and stuff like that. And so I did follow. And I guess I kind of leaned towards following players a little bit more too over time, which is what makes it hurt a little bit more. You invest in more of a player than a team, especially since growing up. I grew up in the DC area. We didn't have the Nationals, right? They didn't come around until 2005. So I went to a lot of Orioles games, but if you're from the East Coast, 45 minutes away is like forever away. You can drive across the state of Texas, or you can drive the entire East Coast practically, and so identity is different there. So Baltimore just didn't appeal to me in that way. And so, sure, we all have constrained resources as far as picking up hobby things and stuff like that. So does it eat into the football? Yeah, but you never look at it that way. It was just an opportunity to have more things to search for and look for and collect. And, everybody enjoys breadth in their collection, I think. And so I absolutely enjoyed that piece of it and that opportunity. And yeah, it's been slim over the years, right? Like we had Zimmerman, but he only had a couple, like 2 Gold Glove years or something. The rest, it was just because of his longevity, because everybody else was just in and out. It was a turnstile as far as the seats for people. We had Levon Hernandez for a year or two at the beginning or something. That was pseudo exciting. I think we had Pudge for about, a year and a half or something. And, Alfonso Soriano for a year, but those were just such fleeting moments that you couldn't really count on. So once Harper came around, and then you got the presumed longevity of Soto, but honestly, Soto's been had some longevity compared to everybody else in the franchise so far, which is crazy to think since he's still so young. Strasburg is still on the team, surprisingly, but he's so injured you just never hear of him anymore. He just hasn't been able to contribute, and that's our last dude on the Giant payroll. So we'll see what happens to him. But I don't look at baseball collecting as something to eat away. Obviously I got some nice pieces across the board from baseball, not just nationals, and I don't think you can really be in the hobby even as a football guy and not know the strength and value of the baseball stuff and just the lore and the history. It's so much deeper, and I have to say richer, just based on the amount of people that are into the baseball history of the game and the hobby than football. So the football guys are still jealous and always looking to cross over that, and so I didn't want to just be on the outside being jealous. I always wanted to be part of it too.
Yeah, I mean the bottom three rows of that case, just to your right there's some pretty incredible names that are represented. I can see them from Ted Williams, you got Jackie, you got Mays, you got Koufax. Those are just the ones I can see and know right off the top of my head. But that's one of the things I've always heard with a lot of the football fans, especially those who weren't a fan of teams that were pre-merger, oftentimes, or ones that have had a lot of success, post like your 49ers or like your Patriots fans out there. So I definitely can see that. I mean, my team does have a history before that. Maybe it would be better if that history was cut off right at that point because it gets somewhat ugly, aside from a few bright spots after that. But yeah, I totally get it. But I mean, when you're getting caught up with a guy like Soto, it would be difficult not to get excited about a guy like that. Have someone who's a teenager who is coming into the league and he's playing with grown men, and just again seeing that team go from 100 lost seasons where they have absolutely nothing to champions. And I'll call it, based on the shirt that you're wearing, that this will be defined as the Natitude era. And for me, Soto that's what he embodies, Natitude, because he plays the game with this swagger that rubs some people the wrong way, but he's really the life force of that 2019 team. Strasburg won World Series MVP. He had one heck of a World Series. Don't want to discredit him. Scherzer was phenomenal throughout that entire season. But really, Soto, I mean, he's going to be the one remembered from that team. But now that he's gone, do you believe that the Natitude side of things is gone? Has this team lost its identity without Juan Soto? Or do you think that there is a way for Natitude to still be a thing in the post-Soto era?
I guess it's possible it's still a thing somehow, because obviously the media folks or the marketeers of the team will decide that, right? If they want to keep pushing the T-shirts and the swag and Masson or whatever, which is the channel that they post, play the games on or something locally there. We'll see what they run with. But absolutely, the team does not have a personality at all. Whatever actual Natitude in the culture and everything that the team had is gone with him, right? He rubbed people the wrong way, I think initially, just because it had been unseen. But when he does that slide and he gives that pitcher the look, it's with this big old grin and a sparkle in his eye, love of the game. And so I don't think anybody was, turned off by that for more than a couple minutes and realized, like, this is exciting. This is something we want to be a part of. But, without his, potential on the team and then his just current, demeanor and things, that was what Natitude to me was centered around. And so without any even real veteran piece, we don't even need an icon, but just an established presence, there just is not one on the team right now. Strasburg is the lone resident old guy, but you're not going to get that from a person that pitches every fifth night if you're lucky, and somebody that's on and off the IR for the last couple of years and stuff there's no chance, right? And so there's just nothing there currently. Hopefully it comes back. I guess they'll push that mantra just because we'll be so youthful that what else are you going to go off of besides attitude at that point? Because it wouldn't be proven results for quite some time. But yeah, a whole lot walked out the door with him. Yeah, and we lost most of our identity. So we're going to be walking around looking for what the heck that's going to be for a good year at least.
It almost feels like there's an identity crisis. So, in terms of an individual identity crisis, a major life change can be something that, if you want to compare it to the sports franchise, well, it lost the face of the franchise. Uh, and that
100%.
may mark a shift in identity where this team doesn't really know what it is. We don't really know what this team is either. This could end up being one of the most lopsided trades in history, one way or the other. We just don't know. But it is going to be one that is talked about for years and years and years to come. So I think to your point, yeah, an attitude it's a slogan at the end of the day. It can be whatever the Nationals want. I looked at their social media doing some research for this episode and saw them pumping the stats of like Hassel and Gore earlier today. It had the hashtag attitude on it, and I'm like, all right, they're going to keep going with it, and maybe that is their identity. But like you said, not having the veteran presence, I think really you don't know what you're getting, and that's really what contributes to this identity loss. Is that there is so much unknown. If it was something that was a bit more stable, then perhaps you could carry that. I want to tie in a past example in sports history. We'll turn back the clock about 30 years. We'll talk about a team that you know well, San Francisco 49ers, and a bit of a different situation, but you have Joe Montana at the peak of his career. He gets injured, is replaced by Steve Young, who has kind of assumed the throne at this point, and Montana eventually requests a trade. He goes to Kansas City. And that was again, I can't imagine as a 49ers fan where you have a guy like Montana who at the time I would say is the greatest of all time to ever do it. And all of a sudden you're going to let this guy walk away to go to bank on this younger guy who he's been getting it done, but I mean, do you really let a guy like that walk out the door? But for me, the difference with that is that Young had kind of given the team its identity, kind of or maintained the identity that Montana left behind. Maybe not exact, and that wouldn't be fair to a guy like Young, but you're the 49ers fan here, so I want you to talk me through it. Kind of, you've experienced that with your team, in the past, seeing that identity change. What are kind of the similarities and differences that you see now with the national situation?
I think we got lucky more with the Young situation because the rest of the team was had somewhat of an identity. Now it completely morphed once he took the helm and showed his scrappiness and all that other stuff, right? But we just had an alternate personality at the time because we had enough significant defensive veterans at the time. Charles Haley's running around. You had the back end of the Ronnie Lott era, but we still had some folks, some Pro Bowlers on defense elsewhere, like Merton Hanks and stuff like that. So it was kind of a defensive switch for a minute there. There was enough veteran presence there to hold that. Just like baseball, you either have the hitters or you have the pitching or whatever. Well, we had one side of it for a while, and then with a Steve Young, it swung to an offensive, at least in appearance, because we didn't put up ridiculous numbers on offense for the Niners there. But, when somebody's that efficient and doing that well on the front end, that's what we're going to identify, right? Just the same as if, in previous years, the Nationals had some fantastic pitching with Scherzer and Strasburg when he was healthy, and even Patrick Corbin pitched in some good games. He's a complete bum now, but then he was. And so you could have said that we were almost a pitching team in some ways, but just it was so much easier, and the fans want to rally so much more around offense on football. Same with baseball. We want to rally around that home run hitter, that young energy, those types of things. And so, there's some similarities in how that energy can really take hold, and they can cover up some weaknesses, but you can lose sight of the other stuff that we had as far as strengths. The Niners still had other strengths. Right now, the Nationals have no other strengths. The only person we could have rallied around in Soto's absence, if he had gotten traded, was Josh Bell. And he went in the trade too, because he was the most established veteran that had been actually playing at a high level, a day in, day out type of guy. We've got plenty of veterans running around, but they are, plug hole kind of guys, journeymen for 10 years. We had a guy last night hit his first home run, his first hit in the majors, because he'd been a minor leaguer for 10 years. You know what I mean? Those are the storylines we're pumping right now. I don't think the Niners were hurting quite that bad back then, but it is a massive shift. I think they at least knew Steve Young was play ready right then and there, and they had a team around him to let him grow into it. I don't think any of the prospects I haven't seen any of those prospects in the trade in the lineup just yet. I didn't watch tonight's game, so maybe I could be wrong there. But we didn't have a team that hey, we'll cover down on you until you figure out how to hit the curve or something like that. We're starting from a little bit more scratch on that one.
Fair enough. While you were saying that, a topic came to my mind because I thought that was a great answer, and just comparing what you've gone through before with this. And I definitely agree. Your Niners, they went on to win championships under Young. We'll see what Abrams and Gore and all those guys can do for your team down the line here in the baseball side of things. But for me, a guy like Soto is the one who carved out the identity of the Nationals. Yes, they were a really good pitching team. When you're throwing out, in 2019 context, Scherzer, Strasburg, good luck. That's a very potent three in a postseason. And then with the 49ers, Montana kind of carved out the identity of them, because I don't really know anything about a 49ers team before Montana times that really has left a legacy, especially hobby-wise. So in those cases, I would say it's more so the players carving out the team's identity. Do you think that there's examples, or is it possible that the teams can carve out the identity for certain players that are hobby relevant? Kind of flipping the script a bit.
I suppose there's an opportunity. The team can create the opportunities. That player's still got to seize them and make the most of it, right? I mean, yes, you can. Everything from just the marketing aspects and how you push that person in the narratives of whatever you're presenting there. But do you let that brand new guy hit in the 4-hole and put everybody on his back right away, or do you let him figure it out in the 7th or 8th spot for a little while, even though they're capable of hitting better, higher in the lineup or something like that, right? They definitely have some sway in those opportunities. Do you bring them in for that clutch pitch hit even when they're not starting or something like that, or you back off and let them slow or develop, whether you have faith in them or not, right? They do have decisions on that can carve that out and hype it up or something like that. But at the end of the day, of course, that player's got to capitalize on whatever is given to them. And that's really why we jump on the back, because it's not going to matter as much what the team does. That player's performance is going to rise above all, no matter where they're at.
I definitely can see that. While you were answering that, I was brainstorming ideas in my own head to answer my own question. And I do think it's possible, but it's one of those things where it's almost like a perfect marriage, where the players that are successful, you can make your team successful, but a player's success doesn't always equate to a team's success, as we've seen many times, especially in baseball, where it is definitely, you do get these superstars who kind of get in isolation on rebuilding teams.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, because the team does do other pieces as well. Just, we had the Joe Montana analogy. He's not going to be known as well without some of them offensive linemen and a Jerry Rice, right? Well, Soto is having what everybody would consider a down year, and it's because the roster is not built around him in any way to protect him, right? And so he's not getting pitches to hit, and so the team could have set him up for even better success for sure on that, right? If he's getting more pitches to hit, he's not leading the bigs in walks, because he's batting when he traded, I think 248, but his on base percentage was still over 400. He's just not getting the hit because if he's on base, who cares? Nobody's really hitting anything around him to bring him in. And so from that standpoint, yeah, absolutely, they can accentuate that a lot in baseball specifically because you can pitch around if you don't have to worry about the rest of the roster too.
That's a fantastic point. I'm glad that you brought that up because who's throwing Juan Soto a fastball in the strike zone this year? I mean, yeah, Josh Bell can hurt you, but outside of that, the lineup starts to thin out. And that's unfortunately, we see that way too often, especially in today's analytics driven game. I mean, we saw Corey Seager intentionally walked with the bases loaded. And no offense to my Rangers fans out there, but that lineup doesn't necessarily strike too much fear in my heart when I look at it on paper. My team's lineup sucks too, so who am I to say that? But really, it's just a sign that we see more and more of intentional walks to guys who maybe 20 years ago didn't quite get that, but where to pitch guys, where to position guys. Soto, when you could really isolate a guy like that on a team like the Nationals. So I'm very curious to see when a lineup now where he has some pretty solid protection. I saw their starting lineup tonight that they posted, and it's pretty.
He's going to be protected.
Yes, it might be right up there with the 2019 Nationals team in terms of where he's hitting.
Yeah, and they'll have more power on the Padres than we have in 19 for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have Bell. Garf can hit it if you need him to. You've got, once Tatis is back, he'll be hitting above Soto, but it just lengthens your lineup. It's going to be a fun team to watch. Let's talk about player collecting and team collecting. You did this a little bit earlier on, and I thought that this was interesting in terms of following the players. You were kind of in on Soto, and from what it sounds like, you were kind of in on Harper, maybe a little bit on Strasburg. So in your baseball pursuits, more so focusing on the players, and behind you there, it would kind of indicate that you do the sets, but your sets are a little bit different than what we normally think of with a set, where it's a set registry where maybe you're only focusing on certain cards, and we see all the great names on the wall behind you there. One of the things I'm seeing right now for player collectors of Soto is that they're selling off their cards. There's a pretty notable one on Twitter today that I saw. He's built up an insane collection over the past 5 years, one of the biggest Soto guys I know, and started selling off his collection today. And it was one of those, like, my heart almost broke for him, just because I feel like his collection was so tied to Soto being a national rather than Soto being Soto. And that to me was just very interesting. Do you yourself find that kind of pursuing your collection the way that you do, that not getting it so attached to one player kind of protects you in a sense from, losing the identity of your collection if you want to go that extreme? Or maybe I can imagine if you were collecting Soto heavily and he was traded, it would significantly decrease your interest in collecting his cards. And in a sense, that could disrupt kind of your activity. But how do you approach it going after certain players?
Yeah, I would say part of it will stem from how you got into being a fan of the team itself, right? So I imagine folks that, if your family was from the area of wherever your team is, and that was your adopted team, on Sundays you go watch, Sunday evening baseball with your parents or something like that. When the players come and go, you weather those storms a little bit better, and you can collect the big players just during their eras or something, because you're a little bit more solidified with that team. If not, though, if you came in at the same time that certain players were, you definitely, you want to connect with the player a little bit more. But, it's still two-sided there with that team. So that's tough for that guy on Twitter. I don't think that's going to be too much of a pervasive activity as far as massive sell-offs, because he's no longer in the Nationals, because the Nationals just aren't one of the biggest fan bases based on only being around since 2005, right? So, and it's the DC area is just a transient population. Most of them aren't from there. They bring their own fandom from wherever they came from a lot of times too. And we see that across all the sports in the DC area. So, the few super collectors or, future super collectors, because at some point you don't always super collect, but at some point you look around and like you've been doing this for a couple of years on one player and all of a sudden it's a super collection, right? It'll definitely derail those folks. I had assumed at some point I was going to get close to that, but I had some lessons learned, I guess I should say. And seeing, because if you're in a true collector's in it for the long haul, they see the long picture, right? And with my Niners collecting that I've been, collecting basically my whole life, cards that I just thought were, or players that I just thought were, everything at the time, all the hype or whatever, you realize in the grand scheme, they come and go. And so things that have longevity in your collection have to really be significant pieces of your team's history and stuff like that, right? And so I don't go all in on players until they've gotten some things under their belt that you just can't take away and that solidified them in the history, like a batting title for a Juan Soto. Even if it's a shortened season, 351 is nothing to shake your head at, right? So those types of things, a first team All MLB, an All-Star, those types of things, I don't know what he was, I think second and Rookie of the Year or something, but he was up there. And so I took incremental steps as he got those incremental achievements, as it were. And I did that with everybody, right? Like, Harper was relatively slow, but he's a Rookie of the Year. So, all right, I can take a couple of steps here. Always an MVP in 2015. All right, well, how many MVPs do we have on the lifetime roster of the Nationals? He's it. So guess what? He is going to be a significant piece of my Nationals PC forever, just based on that, right? Obviously I trimmed it down a little bit when he left, but those types of pieces can stay. But I think that's just I approach it to all of them, right? Because you name anybody that goes all in on their team because they want to get that level of excitement or something like that, they are sitting around with piles of 100 autos of somebody that didn't make it too long. And so I've seen a lot of that, done a little bit of it myself, and so I've tried to avoid that a little bit. But if you look at the population reports of Soto cards and things, they are so high that there's no way that's just Nationals fans collecting them. And so I think, people will stay pretty well involved in following him and things. Baseball is such a big hobby, and people, even if you're deep into your team, you're pretty into the richness of the history itself, and you've always kind of paid attention. Baseball, I think, does that better than football, paying attention to all the players in the periphery and rooting for them, right? That people are going to still root for them, collect cards and things like that. I looked at at least PSA 10 sell-offs for today, and it wasn't an overwhelming number of sales that occurred, and it wasn't, it was $1.02 price point drops, which is, no real margin of error. So those cards aren't necessarily going down just yet. We'll see what happens. Obviously, if he tanks on the Padres, that's one thing, but I don't think there's a ton of Padres fans out there either. So, but people are still collecting plenty of Fernando Tatis, right? Machado is still doing okay. It's a little rougher collecting his, rookie, because not everybody likes to buy a Baltimore Orioles card. But I think he'll be okay, big picture in the hobby. But you definitely will see anybody that thought they were going to be a super collector of him, or something like that, they got derailed with that, because it's tough. I haven't mass collected anybody that didn't start out with my team, because you want that foundational build up as you go, and you just like seeing the cards with your team's uniform on them, right? I get lucky sometimes. Scherzer, he was a Diamondbacks rookie when they were wearing a lot of red and gray, and so his rookie cards look pretty close to Nationals cards. And so I got lucky with some of those, but for the most part, it's tough to collect those types of guys outside of your uniform, no matter how much you like them. I'll still get, base tops rookies, or not rookies, but base tops PSA 10s of like the Bryce Harpers and things like that. But you know, I'm not collecting all that periphery now that he's on the Phillies, regardless of how well he does. And Soto's going to be much the same.
That was a fantastic answer. There's a lot to dissect there.
Yeah.
First of all, it always trips me out whenever I see Scherzer on the Diamondbacks. That's always one of those things that you forget was a thing for a while.
Tigers had their shot too, right?
Yes, yes. One of the keywords that you said there that I liked a lot was transient. And you were talking about in the context of the fan base and like the population in DC itself, but baseball as a whole, I feel, is more transient than ever before. I look at my team's history, and like the '84 team has a very relevant place in the hobby, which might sound weird to say, but it's because there wasn't really one player that stood out. You had Trammell and Whitaker as kind of your figureheads up the middle of the infield, but the special thing about those guys was they never changed teams, and that was more common back then. But you got a guy like Kirk Gibson, where he goes and he wins an MVP with the Dodgers. He has one of the most infamous moments in World Series history with the Dodgers, and he's still universally beloved as among Tigers collectors for his contributions to that '84 team. And I feel Soto the same way, regardless of what happens with the Padres now and the Nationals. That was your first World Series still in franchise history. He's going to define this era that has now come to a close as the guy. And we talked about that a little bit earlier on too, but I totally agree with that. The pieces of that team. I mean, Howie Kendrick was a big part of that team. I don't know where Howie Kendrick is now. I think he's retired, but
Postseason MVP.
He's one of those, yeah, he's one of those folklore guys who you're not going to forget anytime soon, just because of his contributions to the team. And I said that, you can't take that away, as you said. And I love your approach to it, where it's, what you want. You want these homegrown guys who come up and they make an impact, and you go incremental as they make more contributions, which I think is so crucial. I do want to ask, in the past, because you've been through this with guys leaving the team before, when for different circumstances, Montana, Rice, Young over in football, especially with the first two, they're going to other teams. How did that feel back then, and how did that affect really your hobby back then, seeing those guys leave, as you would say now? I mean, with the 49ers, I don't know if you guys have really had any heartbreaking losses in terms of players leaving in recent times. Alex Smith might be the closest one. I don't know how fond you are of Alex Smith, but I mean, that's probably the closest example that I can think of. But in general, what is your kind of how did that impact you back then, and what did you learn from those experiences back then when those guys left?
I would say I got lucky with the Montana Young thing, and that's because, one, I'm not quite old enough to be fully married to Montana as my overall guy. I'm 40 years old now, so my first football game that I recall was Super Bowl 23 in January of '89, and Jerry Rice was the MVP of that game, and Jerry Rice became my favorite player, and so he was able to bridge that gap. If that's my first memory of the Niners, I only got a couple of years of Montana before it was Young's time. Now, obviously, he was everything at the time, and just the gravity of his presence, as far as how he was revered and spoken about, and all the things throughout the game at the time, like, you knew that, and so that added to your fandom, even without necessarily having seen him take on the '85 Bears or something like that, right? But it was very weird at the time to see him switch over to the Chiefs, because Young was still, and Young was everything different, right? He just looked a little squirrelier. He scrambled a little funnier. He was a lefty, and so that was pretty awkward. But Thankfully, I had Jerry Rice to get me through on that one, and young players like Ricky Waters or something, and a Dion to get excited about. And so there were other pieces there that kind of helped bridge that gap until it was overall Young's team. But obviously, we got helped a lot because how often are you going to get replaced by somebody that does as well as Steve Young did? Right? He was breaking all the quarterback rating records and things like that. The only I would say since then on the Niners side of it, big departures were probably just early retirements and things like that, like a Patrick Willis or something. Gore, we knew he had definitely lost a step by the time he was traded. He clearly stayed a good number of years more and bounced around a couple of teams, but we knew as a fan base that we had gotten all of his best years out of him, because he did a full decade with us, and so there was a sadness to see him go, just because he lived with us through so many crap years, because we had a terrible, early 2000s with him. Alex Smith wasn't as bad because he never was a Pro Bowl quarterback when he was on our team, and so obviously he was a number one pick overall, so there was all the hope and potential there. Every year was potential, even when we were 8 years into it or something like that, but it never really happened. So we didn't cry over that one. We were waiting for somebody to come help, but we didn't quite have those blockbusters. Again, Rice left at some point too, but he was so old, I guess you knew it was coming, and we'd kind of lived through that with Montana, with Ronnie Lott, and so I guess we were trained to expect that at some point with Jerry Rice, and Terrell Owens left under all of the madness of the first couple of media frenzies that really ever happened in sports and stuff like that, as 24-hour sports and ESPN really started taking off back then. So that wasn't a surprise. So and never, football is just different in that way, because you have 22 starters out there, and then typically will have a role player or two that you can still significantly support, that contributes and root for and stuff. And you just don't have that volume of people in baseball. And, if you lose your home run hitter, it's only comparable to maybe your quarterback, but at a minimum, that home run hitter is 1/9 of your offense, but odds are it's more than that. And unless the quarterback is absolutely the only thing you got and carries the whole team, it's tough to make it the same comparison there. So just to see everything you got on the team walk away, it's like the equivalent of losing your quarterback, and then also the rest of the team's like, we don't want to play no more, right? And you're not getting no free agents to come here to play with no quarterback here. And so that's the tough part, right? Because we know in the offseason we're not going to attract extra people without really having. Obviously, we got tons of cap space now, so I don't know. Maybe we can get some people excited about making money, but they're not going to be jumping into something to take it to the next step by any means.
Totally get that. And when you brought up the Gore thing, it clicked in my head. Does it sting less for you? And you pretty much already answered this already, but just to tie a nice little bow on it, does it sting less for you when a guy like Gore or Rice leaves, when you know that you've pretty much gotten what you needed out of them to say? That might be a bad way of saying it, but you do feel like their best years are behind them. Like there's not going to be something that you're missing out on, where something like Soto, what makes his situation so unique is he's 23 years old. Yeah. And he's a guy who you said it at the start of the show. He's a guy that you thought you'd be looking forward to watching for the next couple of decades, asking yourself, is this the guy that we're going to have for all this time? And now he's gone. And arguably his best years are still ahead of him. I know, I'll speak from personal experience before I pass the baton over here, is that the Stafford thing this past year as a Lions fan was one that I observed a lot of Lions fans in the hobby to kind of see what their take on it was. And I think one of the frustrations about losing him for a lot of the really passionate Stafford collectors were they really did feel like he could champion a team at least deep into the playoffs, if not to a Super Bowl. Most of them just thought that he could win a division title and make it deep. And he proved that he could. Now, he was on a he was on a stacked team. I'm just going to throw it out there.
Sure,
And
100%. Yeah.
yeah, but regardless, I mean, he had to contribute, and he had several crucial moments where you can point to him and say that's the reason they won that game right there. So I think that was one of the things that stung so many people that collected Stafford as a Lions fan. But for you with Soto, do you think it stings more because he is 23 and arguably, there, even though your team was rebuilding, you would hope that on the other side of that, he's kind of the leader and still the face of the franchise to kind of push you forward into that next era when you're ready to contend again. Whereas Rice, Montana, they're kind of relics of the past at that point in their careers.
Yeah, 100%. It stings a lot more. Each situation's a little different. Like a Gore, it stung pretty good, even though we had used him up because we knew he wasn't going to cost us much money. So it's like, hey, man, I'm a fan of the fans, right? So I'm thinking if I'm an owner and I can get this guy that's been here for a decade plus killing it for us, even if he's just, getting 20, 30 carries for the season, I'll pay him $1.5 million or $2 million to be on the roster and keep the jersey sales going and everything like that. So Gore wasn't going to kill us for that. Now you get like a Pujols leaving the Cardinals or something like that. Well, we still going to owe him a ton of money and be paying for his lower years. That one gets a little bit more difficult. But Soto, like you said, we had the world in front of us, right? Like everything was there. Yes, the money is going to be tied to it, but you knew, and I get it. 15 years. How many can you actually expect? Not everybody is going to make it to 38, 39, playing in the bigs. 100%. I'm tracking on that. But, if we were to get 10 all-star caliber seasons out of those 15, it's worth it when he is the franchise guy. And that's what drives me nuts about, we traded him for so many prospects and stuff. But what were you looking to get out of those prospects? You're looking to get a Juan Soto. You hope, once every 15, 20 years, you find that guy. Well, you have him right now, and you can keep him for the next 10, 15 years. And so we've all seen our team sputter or, thank the sport gods that our team wasn't the one as we're watching somebody else sputter and just send that person down the road or whatever. But, I'm sure the Falcons of the 90s would have loved to have not given up Brett Favre. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, why would you do those things? Because that's what we spend all of our time looking for. You never understand in football where they trade the, first rounder that they got that's already gotten 2 Pro Bowls in their first 3 seasons for a second round pick. And we're like, well, you're not going to get, there's no chance you get a Pro Bowler better than that guy with your second round pick. What are you doing? These are why, you make the picks to get somebody of this caliber. Now you have it. Don't let that get away from you. Because Soto is somebody you absolutely can build your team around for the next 10, 12 seasons. Yeah, it may cost you, 15 years worth of money, but I'll take 10 to 12 good seasons out of every 15 without fail. As an owner, a GM, or a fan, I would do that.
Yeah, it's I'm gonna relate what you just said to the hobby and the way that you and I kind of approach things. We'll both probably feel the same way about this, but I've never really understood prospecting for that reason. I mean, you're paying this money to go for these guys who are, you hope that they'll become what you can get these guys who are currently there for maybe just a little bit more. And in some cases now, some of these Bowman products, the cost of the wax itself, I guess it's just the idea that you could get something very good out of the wax, but what are the actual chances of that? Well, you got to be able to hit the card. You got to make sure that it comes out of the pack in good condition, which is more of a challenge now than it has been in recent
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
And you need that guy to pan out too. So there's just so many layers of risk. And when it pays off, it pays off handsomely for sure. But most of the time I'll pony up a little bit more
Yeah.
later on down the line, right? With a guy like a Harper or something where
Right.
even if they don't live up to the loftiest of expectations, but they're still really good, you can get them at that discounted price later
Yeah.
on. So
But with the prospect prices that we see now, we need them to pan out for the Yankees or the Dodgers, right? Like if they pan out for the Brewers, it still ain't working out for us right now. The way the prospecting is. No, I'm with you. I've always just thought, maybe it's just me as not a full lifelong baseball collector. I've only been doing it for 10, 15 years now, that I just don't understand prospecting in the least bit. I go after the sure bet. That's how I collect. When you collect this volume of stuff, there's always a little bit of investment. And so I like to protect some of that investment. And so I'm always making sure that a guy's got, I look at for how old they are, what trajectory they are probably on. And I make sure that there's, some silver slugger or some all-star action in there before I'm really going after it. And yeah, the prospect, cracked ice, sapphire, whatever of the day, just never made sense to me from that aspect. And the same way with draft picks, and baseball is so much weirder than that, right? Like, football, you can really make something sometimes of a first round pick. You get that starting left tackle that's for the next 10 years, because those are a little bit more reliable. If you get that top 1, 2, 3 pick or whatever. In basketball, you can change your team in about 2 years with your first round picks, because there's only 5 guys on the floor. But baseball is so different than that. And your first round pick may not make the bigs for another 6, 7 years. And we draft them okay with that. But at the same time, that risk is just through the roof, and the amount of rounds that you're drafting and stuff, just, the funnel of, your manpower pyramid, as we would call it, if you're in a professional workspace or something, your minor leaguers here to get to the top, and finally you get one guy spit out of the top, is so big and massive that you got to cast a wide net, all to land somebody like a Juan Soto. You get to be GM of the year if you draft a Juan Soto and develop that guy through your farm system or whatever, and to toss that away, I just don't know. What are you doing? And you're telling me you don't want to put a competitive team. Well, then I might as well make this, black and yellow and call ourselves the Pirates at that point, because I just don't understand that at all.
Well said. Well said. One of my final questions was going to be, where do you go from here in terms of collecting baseball? And I have to imagine the answer is pretty much stay the course, based on, knowing you and what you've told me so far. Is just, it might take a few years to get that next guy, but, hopefully someone among this group goes forward. And that's mostly tied to the Nationals. I mean, of course, you have your row back there where you've got some pretty big names, and I know that's probably where you'd look more so at. But in terms of, I guess, current baseball right now, what does the future hold for you personally, and what do you think people who are in your situation as Nationals fans who want to collect, what do you think they're going to be looking to do over the next 5 to 10 years? Are they going to gravitate towards that 2019 team and the stars from that team? Or are they going to look to the future with the haul that you got back now and some of the names that are going to come up over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I don't think too many people just randomly start looking to the past for that. So I don't know if 2019 will see any type of spike for all of a sudden we'll go back and find the Howie Kendricks and the Strasburgs and things like that. If they're a collector now, they've got probably a couple pieces in the PC already that'll just, they got to stay in there to tell the story and, remind you of where you were in that. For me, and probably most people, hopefully, I cast a wide net in my collecting, and purposely so, to, have some sort of resilience when these happen, right? Some people completely just go full vintage because of these types of things, right? We wait till that guy's had the full career to see if he was a Hall of Famer before you start collecting. There's plenty of people that do that. I love the vintage, I don't know if you can love the hobby without loving vintage and stuff, but I've always been into the modern because I love to stay connected with the current teams. I think that's an important aspect of the longevity in the hobby as well. Yeah, you could spend all your money in the world on collecting Hank Aaron's, but yeah, I think you'll start falling out of love at some point without, because you need to love the sport, not and to pay attention to it now in order to maintain some of that, if that makes sense. So I'm still going to do that. I do a little everything in moderation, including moderation, as I like to call it. And so I'll bounce around. Yes, my Nationals PC is not gonna see much change for sure. It may get a little smaller, right? I'm with 15 cards at PSA now, and maybe 50 or something graded Sotos already. Yeah, I'm probably gonna cull that herd a little bit and see what 20 or 25 I want to maintain that help me tell my collecting story, as well as the team history or whatever during the period that I got to enjoy Soto for or whatever. And then we'll hope for the next guy. My hope is that he's our shortstop right now, Luis Garcia. He's batting well, but hadn't quite hit for power, but he's still in the 280s or something like that, with a couple hundred bats under his belt, and he's very young as well. My hope was to see both of those guys on the field at the same time. Now we just got one. He's not a Juan Soto by any means, but maybe he's a smidge of a silver lining because he's just all potential at this point. But he is on the field as opposed to all potential, and hasn't even sniffed AAA yet. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I'll be looking for something to grasp onto, but as I stated before, I don't jump on those bandwagons too fast. I like to collect the key heritage rookies and the key tops rookies every year, and then if they do something or have a little spark, maybe I send it in to get graded or something. But as far as looking for parallels and maybe some rainbows or inserts, I'm going to stay away for a little while and see what kind of players pan out, and hopefully we do some things in the off season and try to bring back a couple of vets in to balance out the team a little bit. So we'll see, right? Because the old guy on the team is Cruz right now, and he's been playing all year, and he's known as a home run hitter, but he's got 8 home runs all year. So I don't expect to see him next year, and so we're not going to have a whole lot. So we'll see. Thankfully, I've been collecting, from a broad perspective for a long time. So I have the ability to do a little pivot here as football season starts, and look at other things like vintage or other sports, and we'll see how it goes.
No offense to your team, but I really don't want to see Nelson Cruz next year. If he retired after the end of this year, that would be the best news that has come out of baseball for me in 2022. That guy has been the bane of my existence for the better part of 15 years now. But no, in all seriousness, very well said. I think that's a good perspective. And for anyone who's listening to this who was on board with Soto, has gone through this with their player in the past, or even will go through it in the future, because he will certainly not be the last guy. This is certainly, at the same time, one of the biggest examples we've seen of it, especially when you take into context his age and everything else. Understandably, this is a huge story.
But it's starting to be the new normal, though, too, right?
That is very true and very fair, but you never know what will happen to your team. So this is a good way to prep for that and kind of navigate your hobby after that. And Bart, I cannot thank you enough. This was a really fun conversation. Do you have anything that you want to say to conclude the show? And also have you plug all your social medias where you're at, so everybody can go check you out if they want to see more.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, JT. I always love talking the hobby, so I try my best to never say no to those opportunities. And so thanks for hitting me up and letting me be on here with you and share the channel for a little bit. On Bart's Cards on YouTube, same handle on IG, and look forward to talking to more people out there and talking to you again in the future.
Absolutely, my friend. The same goes back to you. I'll leave a link in the description down below to Bart's channel. Encourage you to go check out his collection. He is a wealth of knowledge, and he has an incredible collection. If you're listening on YouTube and you haven't looked at the back wall yet, I mean, just take a look there. You will see some cards that you recognize instantly, and you get a more up close personal view when you go check out Bart's channel. And if you're interested more so in his Soto story, he did a fantastic video. I'm gonna pump here for a few moments. That came out on Tuesday, as of the time we're recording this. It was just incredibly well done. It kind of gives you some more background. So maybe I should have had you watch that video if you're listening to this at the start of this. But you get the point regardless. But again, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Next week's show will be fun. My buddy Garrett over at Card Cutter is going to join me. We're going to be talking about some autographs. We'll talk about just the differences in pack pull, TTM, private signings, and all that. So look forward to that Thursday, 5:30 Eastern time. We'll be sure to see you then. Take care. Stay safe. Be kind.